A full-scale war unleashed by the Russian Federation has been going on in Ukraine for more than a year now. During this time, according to the UN, 18 million Ukrainians left the country. About 9 million have returned, and the rest are still in European countries. Emigration is a global phenomenon that crosses cultural, social, and economic boundaries. Each emigrant movement has its own unique history, reasons, and motivation. People leave their homes in search of a new life, ample opportunities, creativity, political stability, or security. Our state also became a part of this mosaic global puzzle because it repeatedly faced waves of emigration, from the first settlements of Ukrainians on new lands to the present day when the full-scale invasion of the Russian Federation forced them to go far beyond the borders of their native land.
The whole history of immigration of Ukrainians has a lot to do with dramatic events in Ukraine, from which Ukrainians fled or just sought better fate. That is, no matter what wave of immigration or what generation of immigrants we are talking about, the global reasons are usually the same. These are the search for work, for a better fate, the escape from war, non-acceptance of changes in the political and social system.
People left Ukraine and believed that it was only a temporary solution. They nurtured their identity, they worked for political and cultural development. They sought to preserve Ukraine outside of Ukraine, when it was impossible on their native land. At one time, a huge number of Eastern Ukrainians moved, and most of them were forcibly resettled, to the Volga region, the Kuban and the North Caucasus, as well as to Siberia, Kazakhstan, and the southern part of the Far East. It happened within the borders of the Russian Empire, and later on the territory of the Soviet Union. Western Ukrainians, on the other hand, went to Europe and North America. Many people left their native land as a result of constant oppression, not recognizing Polish, Austro-Hungarian, or Russian authorities. A considerable flow of resettlers subsequently escaped from the repressions of the Soviet authorities. In the general flow of Ukrainian emigrants, modern researchers single out several biggest waves.
Historians consider the first wave of immigration to be the period starting from the end of the 19th century, actually from 1861, when serfdom was abolished, to the beginning of the 20th century. This wave of immigration is called the work-related wave, and in fact, many landless peasants or peasants with minor holdings left Ukraine at that time. Those were mostly poorly educated people, people of hard and honest work, who were looking for opportunities for difficult but decent earnings and a better fate for their children.
The last quarter of the 19th century marks the beginning of mass immigration of Ukrainians from Austria-Hungary to the United States of America. After some time, the resettlement of Ukrainians to Canada became widespread. Next to a small amount of things, Ukrainians always kept a bag of selected Ukrainian grain with them. It was this seed that later produced good harvests on the boundless Canadian prairies. Despite the difficulties, Ukrainians gradually farmed millions of acres of land. The second wave of immigration to the West took place in the period between the First and Second World Wars. If by 1914 more than 500,000 Ukrainians left, then in the interwar period this figure dropped to 200,000. There were signs of a Great Depression, and as a result, unemployment in the United States and Canada made itself felt. One of the distinctive features of the interwar period was a new type of Ukrainian resettlement – political immigration.
This is a completely different period, when people, I mean Ukrainians, fled mainly because they did not accept changes in the political system, because of their opposition to the establishment of Soviet power. And then people with a good education, in particular those who represented the intelligentsia or wealthy people, ended up overseas or in Europe. And actually, there were many people of creative professions among them.
It was then that the famous aircraft designer Igor Sikorsky and the physicist Georgy Kistyakivsky, one of the creators of the first American atomic bomb, emigrated to the United States of America.
At the same time, which I'm talking about, such young but eventually well-known and famous representatives of culture and art left Ukraine, such as, for example, Sergei Laifar, the famous Serge Laifar.
After the establishment of Bolshevik power in Ukrainian lands, 80 artists of Alexander Koshet's core capella did not return to the motherland from their tour of the United States. Approximately 100,000 Ukrainians settled in Poland and Czechoslovakia in order to be closer to their motherland. The next mass wave of immigration took place after the end of the Second World War. After the surrender of Germany, approximately 2,300,000 Ukrainians remained on its territory, together with neighboring Austria. Almost 450,000 Ukrainians from Slovakia, Romania and Poland did not emigrate anywhere. They still live on the lands of their great-grandfathers. The contribution of Ukrainians to the social and political life of the countries where they decided to start their new life became undeniably noticeable and important. Ukrainians living abroad have always stayed in touch with their historical homeland. In recent years, because of the Russian occupation of Donbas and the annexation of Crimea, representatives of the diaspora from all over the world tried in every way to help their native country with funds and various equipment, to treat and rehabilitate the wounded. But the most important thing was to influence the governments of the countries so that they contribute to the restoration of peace and tranquility on the territory of Ukraine. However, 2022 brought even more challenges. The world experienced the initial shock because of the beginning of the full-scale aggression of the Russian Federation. Ukraine lost parts of its territories, but recovered and has already returned some lands. The military attack, the destruction and the impact of the war on the Ukrainian economy, all this provoked a new wave of migration. Employees of Ptucha Institute for Demography and Social Studies of the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine divided the departure of Ukrainians into two streams. The first flow is towards Europe. The second is the forced removal of people to the territory of Russia. And it is also very large in terms of population. According to the estimates of the United Nations Commissioner for Refugees, about 2.9 million of our people are currently on the territory of Russia.
They said that the Russian Federation was opening humanitarian corridors for human purposes. This is an unacceptable option for opening humanitarian corridors. Our people will not go to Belarus and then fly to the Russian Federation.
Europe opened its doors to Ukrainians without hesitation. European Union countries bordering on Ukraine have allowed all Ukrainian refugees to enter. Ukrainians have gained the right to stay, work and study in any EU member state for an initial period of 1 year. European business also willingly helps Ukrainians. Enterprises encourage them to find employment. Banks offer special card products for Ukrainians. Add Ukrainian language to web and mobile services. Telecommunication companies provide Ukrainians with free services. This is not surprising at all. Ukrainians make up the largest share of labor migrants with higher education in the countries of Southeastern Europe. However, Ukraine is rapidly losing educated and experienced specialists. At the same time, the Russians are implementing mass deportations of people from the occupied cities to the territory of the Russian Federation. Moscow claims that during the year of the full-scale invasion, Russia took in 5.3 million people from Ukraine, including 738,000 children, calling it an evacuation. The Russian Federation has repeatedly resorted to such actions. The deportation of the Crimean Tatars in 1944 was carried out on fabricated grounds and under absolutely inhuman conditions in order to root out the Crimean Tatar people. The denazification announced by Putin actually has the characteristics of the genocide of the Ukrainian nation, one of the key features of which is the abduction of children. During the past year, the number of newborns in Ukraine decreased and reached the worst figure of the last 10 years, and it will most likely continue to fall. The non-return of large numbers of highly educated refugees and their children will be a significant threat to the economy. According to the experts' conclusions, the annual losses of the Ukrainian economy from the non-return of refugees can be from 2.6 to 7.7% of the pre-war GDP. Studies conducted in the 20th century indicate that about a third of those who left return. However, these statistics may change significantly. According to scientists, the will to return among Ukrainians is much stronger. The creation of jobs, positive dynamics in the economy, and reconstruction of housing will be an incentive for people's desire to rebuild the country. After adopting European experience and values, overcoming all difficulties, Ukrainians will love, give birth, create and raise new generations with new vigor and with even greater thirst and love for the motherland. People must come back. Without the return of people, we won't have a strong economy. People who will return must outnumber those who left if we want to take new steps forward for our country.